Hello everyone and welcome back to part 3 of the Top Gun series. I know I'm lazy, I haven't uploaded a video in ages, yada yada, stream a thing, blah. I've been enjoying myself, it's summer, it's very warm, there's a fan behind me, you can probably hear it. Yeah, we are back in for another installment of the Top Gun series, and this one, title pending, probably to joust or not to joust. That is the question, or there is no joust. I don't know. We'll work out a title. But yeah, so this one, I suppose the title's actually a bit misleading. The simple version of the title is "Do you joust or do you not joust?" Hello, good to see you, man. Let's make that a bit smaller so we can see. Good to see you, Brandon. But yeah, the short version of this is to joust or not to joust. The actual version is how do you have a look at your opponent's list and work out what your target priority is, what to kill first. But that's not a catchy title, so I'm going to channel my Dale Cromwell, and we're going to go with do you joust things or do you not joust things? There's two options on the table. You've got to work out which one you're going to do. You're going to joust the thing, are you a better jouster, or are you not going to joust the thing? And there's a lot of different ways we can choose and decide whether to do that. And obviously you can ask me questions along the way. This is an interactive thing. I'm not just waving and talking at you at the internet. You can, those of you that are here, and hi, welcome. Or to those of you on YouTube, you can obviously ask just questions in the comments, but that's boring. Come on, turn up for the stream, say hi and stuff and chat. I don't know, do what you want. I'm not your mum. That'd be weird. Anyway, back to the thing. So yeah, we have some things that we're going to have a look at today, specifically looking at your opponent's list. How to do that, how to analyze your opponent's list, work out what the threat is. What does it do? Have you seen it before? Have you ever played against something like that? What do you want to kill first? That's quite important. You need to work out what your target priority is in your opponent's list. I mean, as long as you're here, because I'm not controlling your life, you do what you want. If you want to come and watch X-Wing streams, then all the better. So yeah, and specifically as well, like what do you kill first? It's a lot easier to look at what you want left at the end of the game than it is to look at what you want to kill first, because often what you want to kill first is wrong. Your initial, oh, I got to kill that thing. That's wrong. If you have a look at what you actually want left over at the end of the game, like how you can win that end game, that's a lot more useful. How do you kill it? Where do you kill it? What do you do to kill it? There are certain things you need to do to kill certain things. And how do you stop your opponent from doing the same thing to your list? If your opponent knows how to do the same thing to your list, then you're obviously at a weakness. There's a few different ways of doing that, etc., etc. Right. Last couple of things we'll get into afterwards, and some different examples of how we might do this. We'll pick a couple of lists. I'll ask you guys to suggest a couple of lists, and we'll have a go and look at what we might do in certain scenarios. So yeah, here we go. Right then, so how to look at your opponent's list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys, for those of you who are early, congratulations. You guys get to test out some list ideas. So if you have a list, dear viewer, that you really want to know how to kill, then throw it out there. Let's deal with some of the beasties. Let's deal with some of the things that you need to identify, and you can't at the moment. How do you kill it? Like what do you do to get this list deaded on the other side of the table? I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to chuck me a couple of lists, and we'll see if we can do some of those. In the meantime, we're going to have a look at a couple of the common staples of the game of X-Wing. Not necessarily what's constant in the meta, but break down sort of the different genres of lists and how you might win a game and play a game. So in my mind, I'm going to call on Mr. Heaver here. We have the two styles of X-Wing which turned into the three pillars. So if you have a look at the pillars of X-Wing, you've got jousters, you've got arc dodgers, and you have turrets. Those are the three things. those were laid out in an article, I don't know, like 2013 maybe, that Paul did ages ago. Yeah, we got gunships, we got actors 6. Those are going to be useful. So yeah, we've got some different different types of ships. Jousters, art dodgers, turrets. I disagree with that. I feel like the game has expanded now. It's gone past the turret, and I don't think the turret is now its own category. I think the support ship is its own category. I would actually classify a lot of turrets in either the arc dodgers or the jousters group. I think they're part of that. So if you do that, it allows you to encompass this new group of ships. Follows. So yeah, encompass this new group of ships, which is the support ship. You're seeing a few of these, generally like Covenel is a good example, Lair Crew. I was talking with Mr. GC about this today, about how certain ships are now fully support ships, and you have the upgrades to do that, which is kind of cool. But to give it a defining term, jousters, you want to fly straight at your opponent because you are better at shooting than they are, and that is really important. The reason that you will do this is because if you smash your ships head together, one-on-one, you will win. Statistically, or whatever. If you get that engagement right, it might be because you can block them, and then you win. It might be because you've got more green dice. It might be because you have a really efficient way of getting focused target lock, so you can make sure that you just explode your opponent. But for whatever reason, you win that head-to-head confrontation, a joust, like Medieval Knights. Now, if you've had a look at your list and you've gone, I'm going to win the joust, and you had a look at your opponent's list and you think, yeah, I got that, and you're wrong, then you lose that game immediately. So it's not just a case of getting the rage control right and everything else. It's understanding, okay, am I allowed to joust that list? Like, have I done this before? Have you played a practice game and gone, all right, this is what happens? Have you understood that practice game you had ridiculously good dice, so therefore you shouldn't take that as the example of what should actually go down? And understanding that is really, really important. So you need to know when you're the jouster. This was in a thing that the Crates did a little while ago about who's the beatdown. Are you the person who has to joust, or is allowed to joust? Will you win the straight joust? By straight joust, I mean just going toward each other on the same side of the board. You deploy opposite and just run your ships at each other. Who wins that? Or are you the arc dodger? Are you the person that has to fly around the asteroids, break up your opponent's formation, and go from there? Me personally, as I fly generally 2-ship lists, I struggle with lists of 5+. So yeah, it's something that normally if you're flying 2 ships, you are normally the arc dodger. You are normally the one that, and this doesn't necessarily mean, by arc dodger, I'm not meaning that you have to fly around and be like this ridiculously agile ship that is going to dodge every single shot that comes your way. No, what it might mean is that you want to split up your opponent's arcs through the asteroids, as I talked about in my last video with the obstacles. And you are therefore, you're dodging arcs purely by the way you're engaging, because you're forcing your opponent to ship and maybe only half of his list is shooting at you. That is, or could be termed, arc dodging. And a lot of people will find that they don't know what to do. And I'm seeing you guys are saying this now, like the opponent is better at jousting than me, swarms, for example. So what do I do here? Because of the fact that I've got no idea how to deal with it. If I can't go straight on at something, how do I win? If that's you, first of all, the best thing you can do is build the best jousting list out there. Find out what is the best jousting list and play that to death, because then that's all you do. You just point at your opponent. But you also then have to learn how to deal with aces suddenly that out art dodge you. So there's bits and bits. So let's have a look at that then. Let's have a look. You guys have suggested some lists. So yeah, let's suggest some lists. I'm going to use a couple of lists that you guys have suggested. So I'm gonna pick a 2-ship. I'm gonna go with Boba and Fenn. So we are going to use, me as the player, I'm going to use Boba and Fenn, and then we're going to play against some of those lists that you've suggested, and and get some examples. So let's have a look. We've also got some other things, so like using Ketsu, for example. I'll bring on some of that later, because I think the Shadowcaster is something that a lot of people want to work. Modified my Joust list to add area control and auto damage. Yeah, exactly. So there's things that you can take and include in your list to make yourself better versus arc dodgers. But let's get Yasby up, and there we go. Let's have a look at some not well, yeah. Most of the time, these guys would be considered arc dodgers. So we're going to go with the Fire Spray, and we're going to go with Fenrau. New Points World. They can't. Well, they can still take all their toys. They can't just take as much of a big bit as they used to. So yeah, we've got Fearless. We've got Slave One, which is a key for all arc dodgers. You probably want a Seismic Charge in there. This needs to be Boba Fett because he needs Fearless. Some people run Lone Wolf. I'd still prefer Fearless. Where's Maul? So we need Maul. There we go. Modification. Can you fit the hull? Yes. In which case you put it on there. There we go. 187. Still ridiculously cheap. That is full build. Congratulations. So, flying this then. Flying this. Let's see if I can get that. There we go. Don't want that there because it is impossible to see the chat. So, let's have a look at what we've got. We have 2 ships. And we are going to be playing against, for example, let's do Actacan's, or it's going to be known as his anyway, 6 and Fang list. So you have 2 basic Fangs, and we have, where are we? Where's it gone? Where's the sick? There we go, M3A. So we need an M3A with a tractor beam. You need 2 of those, and then you need 2 more with ion cannons. Done. Alright, so now that we've got that, we have the full list. Lovely. Now, let's have a think about this game. Boba is a jousting monster, but what happens when he jousts this? They get an idea. Now, what is this list? This list has 6 3-dice guns, but it's not quite that simple. It's not quite that simple, because not only does it have 6 3-dice guns, it has 2 of the 3-dice guns which reduce Boba's agility by 1, and this is where you have to start to understand your list. So, what does Boba Fett do? Boba Fett gets rerolls at range 1, and he has multiple focus tokens because he's got Maul, he's got his focus. He's really good at mitigating damage as long as he rolls dice. What happens if you remove one of his 2 dice that he gets on defense? What if you just take that away from him? Well, suddenly all of those hits that were just going to be bouncing off him, if people are firing at him with 3-dice guns and going, cool, well, I get 2.5 hits on average, Boba rolls almost 2 hits every time with all of his rerolls, well, he's not taking much damage and he's giving so much back because he gets 4 hits, 4 hits, 4 hits. But if he's just rolling 1 dice, well, he gets 0.8 on average, at which point he's taking 2 hits, 2 hits, 2 hits, and he dies in 5 shots. That's a problem, because the entire swarm, after hitting it with a single tractor beam, just wipes him out in a single turn. If they get lucky, 10 damage, gone. Okay, my version of Boba here had 11 hull, but it's the same principle, right? So if you're going for a straight joust, suddenly you find that I cannot win that. If the numbers go badly for me, I immediately die. Even if they don't go badly, all it takes is for 1 tractor beam to hit, and you are in serious trouble. So how do you then win that game if I cannot fly straight at my opponent? Well, what you have to do is you have to be the arc dodger, right? So to do that, as we've talked about, you have to use the asteroids, you have to break them up. But understanding that in the first place is the key to victory. Because if you don't understand that, well, I can't just Leroy Boba into the face of this swarm, which I've seen a lot of people do. I've watched a fair few games online and in person, that the Boba player just assumes, oh, I just out-joust this, and the interceptors just ruin it. This here is probably the 2nd best jousting list in the game right now, the first being the droid swarm. Specifically the droid swarm with the probe droids, because they can get target locks and double modified shots on you with plasma torps and everything else. So Boba cannot joust this. Boba can joust 4-ship rebels very happily, because he'll probably crash into one and then the two of them that are shooting him, there'll probably be one support ship, as I was saying, which won't do as much damage. So realistically, he's only taking 2 decent solid hits, and the other 2, meh, not too bad. So yeah, there's different things that you have to understand and everything else. But looking at this specific matchup, Boba cannot joust. So therefore, you have to play the arc dodge game. You have to pick them off. You have to split them up. 1-on-1, Boba roasts any of these. He can probably one-shot one of them. Fenn can absolutely one-shot one of them. So if you can get 3 of those arcs pointing in different directions and get both of your ships on individual 6, then you win. Because after that round, you've probably killed one, mauled another. Next round, you do the same thing. Suddenly, there is only, 3 ships left on your opponent's side? And, 3 versus 2, you just win the game. Okay, so question from Mark. What happens if your opponent can deploy after you set up the joust? Good question. Good question. I'm going to come on to that one in terms of deployment, because there are different deployments you can take against different lists. So say, for example, your opponent has a jousting list that is better than yours. You know that, say, they've got an Initiative 3 droid swarm, and you're playing Initiative 2 T-70s. So they will win in the joust because they shoot first. At which point, you are going to have to split them up. You can't just deploy on one side. So there are some different tactics. Maybe you deploy facing sideways with an easy hard to turn in up the side of the board if they don't deploy opposite you. Alternatively, you might deploy in the middle of the board with some gas clouds scattered around so the droids can't come directly at you, and it gives you an opportunity to come at them. Maybe you want to do a split deployment with 2 ships on one side and 2 ships on the other, and have them facing towards the center of the board. So whichever side the droids deploy opposite, well, those 2 ships just run away, and the other 2 then come in through the asteroids for sort of a flank. If the droids keep on chasing the 2 at the front, then fantastic. These 2 get the flank. If the droids turn in towards the other 2, then these 2 at the bottom can turn up and get the flank that you were looking to do with the other 2. There's lots of different ways you can do it. So that's an idea of how to counter those deployments. Yeah, it takes a little practice, it takes a bit of understanding with your list to do it, but having multiple deployments for one squad is very useful. Right then, so let's have a look at another squad, because we understood this one. We understood that we cannot joust this. So let's have a look at one of those other squads, the Azatuks. Actually, sorry, before we do that, I skipped straight over the thing that I was going to say. What do you want the end game to look like against this list? Think about it for a second. If you're flying Boba and Fenn, how are you going to make sure that you win in the end game against this list? Well, what end game means you win? Can Boba win against 4-6? Maybe. Can he win against 2-6-2 Fangs? Maybe. Can Boba and Fenn, who have both taken half health, win against 4-6? Yes. Okay. And there we go. Liz is immediately saying, okay, remove the control ships. Right, so what has to die first? Not the Fangs, which people often shoot first because they see them as the threat and the 3-dice guns. Actually, what needs to die first from the Boba Fenn perspective is the spacers. They're easier to kill, and they're more threatening. So, yes, you have to make sure to get to an end game without those control ships that threaten you. You have to do 2 things with Boba and Fenn. You have to keep both of your ships alive. That's really important. Keeping both of your ships alive until your opponent has 3 or less ships. And then you have to make sure that you kill those control pieces, specifically the tractor beams, very, very quickly. If you can do that, then you can very easily win this game. Obviously, your opponent needs to be aware of that and be able to stop you. Your opponent is trying to force you into a straight joust. And your opponent needs to make sure that a healthy Boba isn't alive at the end of the game, so they have to kill Boba first, because Fenn can be blocked, and therefore he can be killed. Yes, so that's what you do here. Let's have a look at another list. So we still got Boba Fenn. Let's have a look at what was one of the other ones we had. We had the 4 protons and Death Rain. That's a reasonably simple one to do, but I'll touch on it in a second. Let's go for the other monster. Let's go for the Azatuks. Let's go for that one. Okay, so Yasby, Quad Tuk-Tuks. Where are we? There's the Azatuk. 1, 2, 3, 4. and as Mr. Heaver recently spanked me with it, Sabine, Intimidation, TIE Fighter. Cool. So, hello, good to see you, Enigma. Right, so we got this. Boba Fett versus Wookiees. How do you win this game? What's going to happen? Well, if you just leave them to shoot you, you're going to die. So we need to remove ships. We need to remove ships as quickly as possible. So thinking about the end game, can Boba and Fenn survive the end game? Okay, what do I need to kill? If I take out 2 Wookiees, Boba and Fenn have got a pretty good chance against 2 Wookiees. Pretty good. 2 Wookiees, 2 Wookiees. What about 2 Wookiees plus Sabine? Can Boba do it? Yes, he's got Slave 1. He's never going to get blocked. Can Fenn do it? He's very predictable. Sabine is probably going to block him, and 2 Wookiees against an intimidated Fenn means Fenn just dies. So what needs to happen? Well, we need to kill Sabine. Okay. If Fenn is going to be in the end game, we need to kill Sabine. Other solution, if Fenn isn't going to be in the end game, then what do we need to kill? Well, we need to make sure that we kill some Wookiees quickly, and then Boba can just clean up. Because he will naturally, he's got a lot of health, he's got 2 agility dice. The Wookiees only have 1, so you can win an end game with that. So, whilst you are correct, Liz, in that Sabine should go, she's not quite as threatening for Boba as she is for Fenn. So again, it depends how you want to get to your end game. There are multiple different ways. If you're thinking that Fenn is going to be the one left over, Boba can't survive that many shots, then you kill Sabine quickly and then you kill as many Wookiees as possible before Fenn dies. But actually, I think Fenn is really weak to these Wookiees. He hates side arcs. So what's going to happen is that the Wookiees are going to try and shoot him as much as humanly possible out the sides, just take those opportunistic shots, and eventually he's going to go down to bad dice. So I think realistically what you want as an end game here is you want a couple of Wookiees against Boba, ideally without Sabine, but it isn't the absolute be-all and end-all. Reason being for this is that they are single modified dice. Boba has really, really good dice. So getting behind the Wookiees is always great. Boba's really good at that, as he has the rear arc. So how do we get to that? Well, we need to kill Wookiees fast. So actually, Fenn in this game is the distraction piece. He is the one that goes in and causes as much damage as humanly possible. He actually wants to joust the Wookiees. He doesn't want to be in side arcs. So if he tries to flank them, likelihood is they're just going to do some 2 turns and they're going to hit him from the sides. So realistically, Fenn wants to be boosting into range 1 to get as much defense as possible and to get his 5 dice hammer off. So absolutely, you will split up Boba and Fenn at deployment. What you want to do is you want to make your opponent think that he's trapped Fenn. You don't want to let him know your plan. If you point Fenn straight at the Wookiees immediately, then that he's probably just going to gun for him, all 4 Wookiees, you've probably lost the game. If you go, okay, let's deploy Boba on one side, not opposite the Wookiees, deploy him as far away from the Wookiees as possible, and then put Fenn in the middle. And then sort of dangle Fenn as bait and make him think that, oh, I can catch him. And then as soon as he thinks that he can catch you, make sure Boba's ready, then you ram Fenn straight at the Wookiees and hit them with Boba at the same time from the side, at which point Boba and Fenn shooting can kill a Wookiee in one turn if you get it right. If you got the range 1 and the range 1, you can do 9 damage. It'd be lucky to do, but you can do it. Plus bombs and everything else. So it's a possibility. And I think that as long as you can get a couple of those range 1 shots out of Fenn, I would even deliberately crash him into the front of the Wookiees if it could get him another turn of shooting, even without his focus. Just getting more damage is a good thing. It will also take the Wookiees a little bit of time to kill him, so he can be quite a good distraction if the Wookiees have to chase Fenn. So if he can limp away on 1 health, that's quite good for you. So we're thinking about all of these endgame setups. We haven't really had a look at whether or not we can joust this list yet. Looking at efficiency, again, it comes down to Boba. Boba can tank those 3 dice shots, but he probably can't tank all of them. So he needs Fenn around to help him. But if you're jousting them 2 ships on 2 ships, yeah, that's okay. They will chew down one of them fast, but you will have the other one left. 2 ships plus 2 ships plus Sabine, that is a problem. So if you're doing the straight joust, you lose, because Sabine will get a block. It doesn't matter which one, but she will get a block. She will be able to get in the way. However, if you're coming in on an angle, then Boba can use a slave 1. Fenn is a lot less predictable if he's unstressed. So this is a bit of a weird one in terms of, are you the jouster? You're not the jouster. The Wookiees are the jouster. However, you do want to set up a joust, but you want to set up a joust with 3 or less. You can't handle 5, you can handle 3. So you are trying to reduce the amount of arcs to the point where you can handle that straight joust. So there we go. There's a couple of examples of how I would sort of have a look and analyse this from Boba Fett's perspective. Sloane Swan were given problems. I actually disagree. Hey, good to see you from Ontario. We like having the Canadians in here. Okay, sorry. I thought we were talking about the Reaper Swarm. So the Sloane Swarm, it's a pain. Have you ever seen me play a proper runaway game? The Torkill Swarm game at Worlds was probably a good example of this, top 32, where I just didn't engage for a solid half hour. The way that you kill with Boba and Fenn against the Sloane Swarm, there isn't an end game that you win. The end game that you win is... Sorry, apologies. There is an end game you win. The end game that you win is 4 academies versus 1 of your ships. Ideally Boba. You can win that game. Can you get to that end game? No. You cannot get the Decimator in a reasonable amount of time without losing Boba. You cannot get the Decimator to low enough health with its reinforced, with its Vader shenanigans. He will do too much damage to you, especially with those TIE fighters shooting for you to win that game. So it turns from the end game that I want here, Boba Fett versus Sloane and Decimator, it goes from, okay, I want an end game where I've killed this much stuff so I can table my opponent, to, okay, my end game has to be I stay alive. That is your prime concern. Your only concern in that game is staying alive and not giving up points. If you haven't given up points by the final round, then you dive in and you halve a TIE fighter. That is how you win that game. Or you kill one, it doesn't matter, it's the last turn. 2 stress doesn't matter. So you spend the entire game running circles around the board, and then you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And then on the final turn, you smack into them. You ruin a TIE, and you win the game, because 22 points versus 0, still a win. That's how I play that game. I almost did it in my top 16. So yeah, the Space Jam top 16 is a good example of that. I thought I had enough time to take on half of Rack. I didn't, but because to kill Rack. So my aim there was to kill Rack, but because I hadn't killed Rack with enough time, I then just decided, well, I've got half of Rack. I haven't taken enough points. I now just disengage. That's another strategy for Boba and Fenn. They do enough damage to Rack during the game that they've halved him. Half of Rack is not half of Boba. Sorry, it is more than half Boba. So yeah, again, you have to keep Boba healthy. You can take half on Fenn, you can't take half on Boba. And I think that's the only way you win that game. Short of just chancing dice. We're talking here, we're not talking about just rolling the dice and seeing what happens by just ramming in, jousting academies and just taking 2 stress on the chin, or just trying to kill the Decimator. In most situations against a good player, you will not have enough time to kill that. So there we go. So I hope you guys can kind of see what we're doing here in terms of understanding, okay, what does the end of the game look like? What is the end of the game that we are trying to achieve? And is it possible to get there? If it's not possible to get there, what is the second best end of the game? Like how do we get to end of the game where we win? Final salvo obviously isn't an option against the Decimator, so you have to kill something. If during the game you can arc dodge so much that you can just get a half academy, well, fantastic. You never see him again. You just go, cool, I've got my 11 points for half an academy. I now just don't die. And this is my win condition. And yeah, I've actually had a judge talk to me about this, being called to my table about this before. because it was back, I think it was back in 2015 when I was flying Jake and Han, the ultimate runaway list. I'd halved, it was against the Suntir, I think it was the Grand Inquisitor at that point, but it was Suntir, Palp, and something, maybe Vader. And I halved the shuttle, and I decided with half an hour to go, nope, that's it, I'm done. And yeah, I'd halved the shuttle and I was just gone. Han was still healthy, Jake wasn't going to die, so I just booked it, and I spent the remainder of the game doing donuts, waiting for Suntir to attempt to catch me, and he couldn't risk getting into combat, so the guy called the judge to the table and said, well, look, this guy is clearly slow playing, and the judge's opinion was, well, he hasn't slow played because he has killed some of your ship. So he's gained the points he needs, and unfortunately it is now his choice with which to run away, because he has taken the onus, he has got those points and then run away. So I severely doubt that if you ever do that, I mean, it's not a very nice way to win the game, but at the end of the day it is a win. So yeah, it's being aware of different strategies that you can take. Anyway, we kind of got off kilter a little bit there. So yeah, so we've dealt with a fair few of these points actually. So what do you want to kill first? What do you want left at the end of the game? That is the absolute question to ask yourself at the start. When you sit down and see your opponent's list, and it's like, right, how do I win this game? By what do I want left in the last half hour? If you can get to there, then okay, how do I get that point? Where do I engage? And this is where it comes to experience and prep, right? Yeah, the strategy against Sloane does work against the droid swarm. Problem with the droid swarm is there's a lot of them, and they can cover the board better. The droids are actually faster than the Decimator. Decimator is quite a slow beastie, and the TIE fighters have to stay in range of the Decimator, so it's a little bit tricky to run away. With 7 ships versus 5, it's a bit harder to run away from them. So absolutely, you can do it. But the droids, they will do is they will sit in the center of the board on some asteroids, rotate until you stick yourself in a corner, and then they'll cut you off at the pass. So you need to fly very, very well, especially in 2.0 without the auto thrusters to keep you safe as an ace player. You need to fly very well to be able to run away, which is normally why I advocate going for some form of end game. It's very, very rare that you end up in a situation where you have to run until the end of the game. Normally, it's through bad lists building, which means that you don't have an answer to that list. So if there is a common list, such as droids, that you cannot kill in any other way apart from running for time and halving something on the last turn, or midway through, then you probably need to go back, have a look at your list and see how you can change it slightly, because realistically that's not a reliable way to win a game. So yeah, it does work against the droids, it's just very hard to pull off. So, and again, if we have a look at how I just did that, I looked at a few lists and went, okay, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do, and I can carry on doing that for you all day, but it's not going to help yourselves. You need to be able to get that ability to have a look at a list. And how do you get that? Well, you get that by playing games. You get that by experience, and by putting your list into lots and lots of other different situations, so you understand how that works. Now I'm doing this at the moment. I'm testing a new list, having fun with some First Order, and there's been a couple of games that I play with my friends where I've just gone, okay, let's see what happens, and I've just put my ships on one side of the table opposite a list that I'm not sure whether or not I can joust. Like, obviously things like droid swarms I know I can't joust, but some certain lists you go, could that work? So I give it a go. I ram my ships down my opponent's throat and see if it works. And if it doesn't, okay, have a look at the game. Was there something I could have done that means that could have worked in a different scenario? Could I do that better next time? Try it a couple more times. Okay, that clearly doesn't work. I need to be the arc dodger here. Or you try arc dodging and you realize I'm losing this game multiple times. What happens if I just joust my opponent? And you might find that, oh wait, actually, this is the way to win this game. I force my opponent into a joust instead of trying to play the arc dodger with ships that maybe aren't built for it in terms of what you need to kill. Certain situations, you have a list that is both an arc dodger and a jouster. You have some versatility. maybe you have, say for example, Suntir and academies. Suntir and 5 academies. You've got an art dodger, but you've also got a big jousting block. The purpose of the jousting block is to get your ace into an end game that he can win. So your jousting block goes, cool, on my opponent's side of the ship, side of the board, there is an initiative 6 ship that moves after Suntir. I'm going to kill that because then I win the game. Because he's got 2 initiative 5s, they'll never catch Suntir. Suntir will just pick them off one by one. So the aim of the game is to murder that initiative 6, keep Suntir alive, and then I win the game. So that's what you do. Your opponent's job is to go, cool, I'm going to keep my initiative 6 safe while my 2 5s slowly chew away at the swarm while Suntir is scared of the 6. So you get into a bit of a cat and mouse situation where the 2 groups are chasing each other around the table because the jousty block is chasing the 6, the 6 is chasing Suntir, and the 2 5s are chasing the jousty block, and you get this triangle of everyone's trying to kill everyone else, and this is where you get the jockeying for the position, the board control that happens in some of the really good games. So yeah, and this is where the preparation and the experience is important, because experience-wise, the more games you play, the more you understand how that works, right? Sorry, Tobit. Say that again. You just said Wookies, and then I got nothing else. So post that again. I may not have got the whatever you posted first time around. But yeah, so obviously experience, great, because then you understand how your list operates. But also, once you've got a bit of time playing the game, you can do what I'm doing and sit at home and go, okay, let's think about this list. How do I win? Let's think about this list. How do I win? And obviously that doesn't work every time. It helps to have board experience and time against these lists. But what I did for the World Championships is I sat down and I made a list. I actually wrote it out on the plane on the way to the World Championships. And I just wrote a list of, okay, for this list, I do this. So I go and kill this first. For this list, I go and kill this first. For this list, I need the asteroids to be there, and I need to deploy like this, otherwise I lose the game. That's really important. So yeah, there's different things that I was learning, and as I was playing the game, every now and then something important would crop up. Like, for example, with my worlds list, when I was playing against droids, I needed 2 big rocks on the outside because of the fact that the droids could sweep in. So it's like, right, when I play against droids, it doesn't matter that they're asteroids. If I put 2 big rocks there, that works really well. Playing against Boba and 2 Fangs, I realised plonking in sheer luck. I kept on putting asteroids in random places, and Boba kept on ruining Whisper. Suddenly I put a big fat asteroid right in the centre of the board, which would be weird because normally he'd just fly around it. But for some reason, every single opponent I played where there was a big rock in the middle of the board tended to get a bit stuck around that central rock, and it meant that Whisper, being more manoeuvrable, could get some arcs on Boba and kill him. Don't know why. I still don't understand why that works, because I feel like mentally, understanding the game, it shouldn't. But it turned out it did every single time. So now against Boba, I just put a big fat rock in the centre of the board and go, cool, let's keep on trying it until it doesn't work and people learn how to fly around it. And yeah, Mark, it's something that, like, again, your standard X-Wing player is not going to do this. With good reason, because why would you think this much about a game with toy spaceships? But if you want to get better at the game, it's something that you can do. And naturally, it's something that you'll do in your head when you rock up at a table. You go, cool, I want to do that. But if you're at least aware of the fact that you're going, okay, what am I looking to get into the end game, and how do I get there? If you start thinking about that, then it allows you an edge on your opponent, because they're just thinking, I can joust, pew. So there we go. It's stuff that you can do to improve. So I've given you some examples, given you some ideas about why some preparation is important, and even different strategies you might take. So I think now is a good opportunity. I'm going to go and have a look at some of the questions that people have thrown my way over today on Facebook and some other places. But this is time for you guys in the chat. So if you guys have any other questions, please throw them my way. Anything that springs into your brain. Doesn't have to be related about this episode, obviously that helps. Does it have to be a big rock in the middle of the board? Good question. I've just found that the biggest asteroid right in the center worked really well because Boba wants to normally turn one way or the other, and if you engage him at the right point, then it does that. I don't know, it's a combination of different things. It's how I fly. But again, that's for me. That was for my very specific list at that point, worked having that rock there for Boba. For a lot of your different lists, maybe something else will work. Maybe other things will help. So it's important to work out what works for you. Right then, let's go back to, here we go. So we've got a couple of these. Let's go have a look at some of the questions and go from there. So, one from Mr. GC. What makes a better jouster? High health or more agility? So it's been something that has been in the game a little while now. People saying, well, if it's got 1 agility, it's a jouster. The more agility it has, it should be an arc dodger. The less agility it has, it should be a jouster. Thinking B-Wings versus Suntir, for example. But actually, if you think about the Initiative 1 Alpha, the Initiative 1 Alpha Interceptor is a jouster. It's what it does. It just points at things and uses the fact that it has 3 agility dice to be really efficient. The 6 low initiative are really good jousters. But then if you think about other ships, the Striker, for example, the Striker is less of a jouster and more of an arc dodger, even if it's Initiative 1. Same thing for the Reaper, because it has that maneuverability. So different ships fill different roles. I don't think it's necessarily having a certain stat line that makes it a good jouster. Obviously, certain stat lines do lend themselves to being good at jousting, 3 attack dice, 4 attack dice, etc. But it's a good idea. So think about Paul Heaver's list. How about remove Sabine Tie and have a bandit pilot squadron? I mean, I could talk about how to make that squad better all day. Paul has thought a long time about it. I've done list building, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. Basically, personally, I think he's got the best version. I've been thinking about this. I can't think of a better thing that's been. Maybe Zeb Shuttle, but that's about it. So 4 Wookiees perform a white 0 and stand still and reinforce or barrel roll. They don't have a white 0. Oh, sorry, with Leia. I mean, it's not a bad shout putting Leia on there if you want to put Leia instead of Sabine, which isn't a bad shout. But I like the idea that, so Wookiees' weakness is aces, surprisingly, even though they have that massive arc. A well-flown ace list can slowly chew apart Wookiees from long range, and that's the key, long range, where you're only getting shot by 1 or 2. But Sabine shuts down the actions and the places that the aces can go so the Wookiees can catch them. That's my view on it anyway. Would I say that the 2-Fang full sick list is stronger in the current meta than the Torkel Swarm? You love both lists. Well, that's a very good question. Think about what they both do. Think about how they work. Torkel Swarm operates by preventing initiative kills. It makes sure, or creating initiative kills more to the point, you make a ship shoot last so it can't shoot you, and you just wipe it off the board. My aces list is actually quite weak against Torkel Swarm, which is why I ran away from it for half an hour, because of the fact that normally the way that I win games with that aces list is it's very aggressive for an aces list. Vader and Whisper just remove a ship before it can fire back. So normally you arc dodge a couple of things and then you kill one before it fires back, taking away most of the effective firepower. But the Torkel list says, right, that ship who was going to kill my ship is now not allowed to shoot me before I shoot, and makes all of your firepower very effective. Whereas the 6 one, that does the same thing in terms of protecting protecting your ships from dying. It just does it with green dice. So if there's a meta with lots and lots of red dice, then Torkel Swarm is better. If there's a meta with so if there's a torpedo meta, for example, big spikes of damage, then the Torkel Swarm is better. If there is a meta with lots and lots of ships, then the 6 Swarm is better. Aren't Wookies just bad B-Wings? Well, they're very different to B-Wings. They have a really, really big arc and pay for that with less initiative and less maneuverability, but don't really mind because they have a really big arc. So they're different. They're a different design space, a different ship. Same stat line, but very different ship. How do you modify your list post points update? Good question, actually. I'm not going to analyze a separate list. What I'm going to say is you should see whether your list is still viable. What made it good? Is it still capable of doing that thing? If it's not, can you remove a couple of ships to allow it to still do that thing? Sorry, that one dropped off. Let's just get the full chat up there on the side. Scum's dress mechanics, I like them. Is it really competitive? Depends. Actions are not so much the flavour of the month at the moment. Multiple ships and force are. So as more ships come in, maybe that rely on actual actions like the 6, Scum's stress control would actually be pretty good against the 6 if you can get in without getting roasted. So there we go. So yeah, that's that one. So no, I mean, so fully addressing your point there, Kempers. I think if you're using, say, a droid list, as you clearly are, I haven't had a look at it, but if you're using a droid list and it's gone up in the points change, again, think about what made it good. What made it good was the fact that you could have all this efficiency as a jousting list. If your droids have gone up in points, can you still fit that efficiency while removing a couple of upgrades? Does taking off the struts mean that you can no longer play that list? Or do you now need to practice a bit more and understand your rock deployment better so that the struts, losing struts on all 8 of your ships and gaining yourself back the 8 points that you lost beforehand, does that mean that your list is still absolutely just as playable? Because nothing has changed in terms of how it operates. It just now can't land on rocks anymore. So are you capable of flying your list without that advantage? If you're not capable of flying your list without that advantage, then that must mean that the ability to land on rocks was what was winning you games. In which case, how much can you remove from your list in terms of efficiency? So maybe you take out a torpedo or you take off pro droids or whatever. But are you able to remove that and still win your games by the ability to land on rocks? Or maybe you need a balance in between the two. So it's always a balance thing. If a list has been made worse, well, okay, do you move on? Do you try and make that list work, etc., etc., etc.? So there we go. Yeah, I find it's best, as a genuine point there, what Kemper said, struts make your opponent make a mistake in turn 0. That's really interesting. I try and avoid that in terms of mindset when I'm looking at a list, but that's something for me. So when I make a list, I always assume that my opponent is the best that they can absolutely be, right? So I assume that my opponent is not going to make a mistake. So taking things that I think might make my opponent make a mistake, well, they're not going to, because they understand my list as well as I do. They understand their list better than I do. So if they're not going to make that mistake, then what's the point? On the flip side of that, there is a big argument to be had that taking those things in your list will get you to the cut consistently. Now, I rely on the fact that I practice way too much and my ability at the game to get me to the cut consistently, and then hopefully, because I've built my list to the very best that it can be for every single game and against those best players, I hope that that will then give me the edge in the cut against those players. A lot of the time it doesn't work, but that's the opinion I take. A lot of people, like a lot of the Dutch players, take the opinion that winning through a cut is just, a lot of it is luck anyway once you're flying at a good enough level. So they will take a list that will consistently get them to the cut. So they will basically are very good at beating scrubs is probably the best way of putting it. But it's such an efficient list that it will take people by surprise every time, or etc., etc. Because once they're in the cut, then eventually, through the number of times they get in, they will eventually win a tournament. Which type of list is best now? Good question. I don't think there is a best list. I think there is a lot of good lists. I think there is swarm lists are now better. But I also think that there was a lot of Arc Dodger lists, FO for example, and Rebels as well. There's Rebel Arc Dodgers have got a bit of a boost recently with the Falcon coming down in prices, and other bits. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, it's essentially what I, yeah, like I can go and critique a list all day long, but I think at the end of the day, my advice isn't going to help you as much as you going and doing that thing yourself. If you can't put in the time, then you don't have to put in the time in terms of the games. Have a look at what you think your opponent is going to do, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. I'm in the lucky position that I don't sleep enough, so that is why I end up doing. It's only midnight. I've kept this one to only 50 minutes so far, so I'm doing pretty well. So there we go. Right, there was a couple more things on a couple more questions here that I do want to deal with. So there wasn't one on that one, so I think it was the UK group that it was on, with a couple more questions on there. Might have been someone Nova. No, I think I've answered all of those. So, are they already on Sweden? I think we're all good. I think, unless you guys have any more questions, then I think we are good. So, that was episode 3 of Top Gun. Just to clarify, episode 1 was all about building a list. Episode 2, all about asteroids. And this one, episode 3, how to really dive deep into your opponent's list and what to kill first. So yeah, there is some of the ones coming up. The next one is going to be on engagements, where to engage, how to make sure that you have a good engagement for your list, and a little bit about the numbers of X-Wing as well. So how to understand what is a good engagement, and some of these things that I'm using to say, well, this, even without looking at it, I know that this list will win in an engagement because of X, Y, Z, just looking at the raw numbers behind it. Is there anything that I think needs an FAQ? Kill the Nantex, but I'm biased. I think the Nantex is actually in a pretty good place right now. I would have loved to see tracked beams be a choice in between taking the token or moving, but hey. I think Force needs to change. I think Force points should only be regenerated on either a blue move or a red move if you're a light side or dark side user, or just on a blue move. I think that'd be really cool and interesting. I think it would also encourage Jedi to use an R4 astromech, which would also be grand, because they're not using regen, and that again makes them fair and balanced. It gives people choices. I like it. I like those kind of things. I think it makes for some interesting, go away mosquito, game design. I got it. Ha. So yeah, that's my thinks. Hopefully you guys had a good time, and yeah, stay tuned. There is eventually going to be more of these. I promise I will stream more. Sorry for taking ages. And thank you to A Kempers. I apologise for just generally ranting at you for a little bit there. Actually turned out to be a really good discussion. I just try and avoid critiquing every person's list, because then everyone sends me messages going, how do I make my list better? And that's not what I'm doing this for. I'm making this to improve the general level of the X-Men community, as opposed to just me telling you how to do things, because I don't think that's the right way to go about it. Anyway, it means that you guys can beat me up later. Hey, we will call it there, and I will catch you guys soon. Have a wonderful evening. This is Top Gun. This has been Ollie, and yeah, be wonderful people. Stay cooler. It's really warm right now.